Are you dreading April? Do TurboTax commercials make you break out in sweat? You've been Googling. Does the IRS have dark dungeons? Well, if you're dreading a big balance due in April, let's talk about it. Welcome to the channel, like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your pressing tax questions. First thing people want to know is, do I owe interest and penalties? Tax bill is enough as is. Penalties, interest, we're going to use those interchangeably. They mean something a little differently, but in the same way, your bank charges you a late fee, your credit card charges you a late fee. It's part of the implied interest rate. At the end of the day, you're paying more money. And based on the amount of delinquency and the timing of your payments, there's interest that applies, and then there's penalties on top of that with the IRS. But we're going to use that all interchangeably here because we're avoiding them. So, do you have a penalty problem? If you clicked on this video because something changed in your income situation, maybe you got a second job or your side hustle's really taking off, well, there's a good chance you're in the clear. Yes, the IRS expects us to pay tax evenly throughout the year, whether that's through withholding for employees or through quarterly estimates for the self-employed, or some combination of those if you're both. But what does paying evenly mean? Well, it means you're hitting the safe harbor threshold. Safe harbor has a lot of ramifications, but quite simply, it is either paying in the lesser of 90% of your current year tax liability, current year meaning 2024, or 100% of your prior year tax liability, 2023's tax liability. If you're a high income earner over 150,000, that'd be 110%. So if you're like the two people we talked about, you added a second job or your side hustle's really taken off. Well, in both those cases, you haven't changed your W-2 from 2023. You still have that job, hopefully you got a little bit of a raise, and your withholding is going to be the same. And as long as you are covered in 23, your 2024 withholding will cover your 2023 tax liability. Okay, so what are you going to owe? Penalties aside, what's the tax balance due? Well, of course, this depends on a great number of factors, but let's take a side hustle. You're getting income. Yeah, you got your W-2 still, but you got this big pile of new money and scared, what's the tax man going to take the bite out? The general rule you're going to find is 25 to 30% of your net profits. Not your total income, if you have a W-2 or a rental property or something, no. Just this self-employed activity and its net profit. Net profit is not the 1099 amount. It is your 1099 minus ordinary and necessary business expenses. Of course, depending on your business, that could be really complicated on what deductions actually are, but generally the IRS is going to want them to be ordinary and necessary. Are they typical of someone in your field? All right, so you have that net income number. What are you multiplying it against? Well, again, 25 to 30%. That's a ballpark. It's a rule of thumb. The higher your income, the more you should err on the side of 30%, maybe 32, 33%. Factor in a state income tax. 41 out of 50 states have one. You can easily Google yours or use 5% as a proxy. Finally, if you did have a W-2 back in 2023, you were used to the big refund, you were just going on your merry way. Well, that refund's still going to help you out. It'll offset that amount due. So if you had a $2,000 refund last year and you're staring at maybe owing $5,000 based on this 25 to 30% formula, well, that'll probably look more like $3,000 once you get the credit for the W-2 withholding. Generally, this is going to hold true for people making under $100,000 to $150,000 a year for single, or $200,000 to $250,000 for married filing jointly. The higher your income, the more jobs and situations you got going on, the more this kind of general rule breaks down. And yeah, take it with a grain of salt because I do taxes for a living, but maybe go find a tax professional. Found this content helpful, be sure to like and subscribe. Definitely leave a comment with your question. And also, if you're not self-employed and you're worried about your balance due, if you have a withholding problem, watch for my next video. We will be talking about W-2 earners and the inscrutable Form W-4.